All right, greetings. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. Apologize for my few minutes of lateness. I was working on some music. I'm in the middle of trying to finish something up, and just got sucked into the vortex. That's what happened. All right, guys. Welcome. We're live on Rockfin, Callin, and on YouTube. Let's get into it. Time's a wasting. Oh, I got a good contribution to the show from Andrew Lubbers. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. Just wanted to say I received it. Appreciate all your support, everyone. Everybody on Patreon, PayPal, Cash App, etc. Coffee. Thanks, guys. I know I'm playing with my phone. It's bad form because I'm doing a call-in show. Probably sounds like that. Sounds like that. All right. Let's get into some conversating about the state of the world and such from the professor. To those who have devoted themselves to not paying attention to the only story that matters. That's a really good sentence. To those that have devoted themselves to not paying attention to the only story that matters. Oh, yeah. Fair assessment. I haven't even read the tweet yet. That's just who he's addressing. All these other news platforms and journalists, quote unquote journalists, are covering all these really important stories, and they're all, sure, they have. I'm not saying they're unimportant. I'm not saying none of those stories matter. I'm saying in the context of maybe losing habitat for humans in the near future, I'd say those stories kind of pale in comparison. None of those things will matter eventually. So he's correct. Anyways, but people are really very insistent that they look everywhere but at the largest elephant in the room. Let's talk about that coffee table. That is a fine coffee table. What's wrong with the lights? These lights. I don't know. Isn't there an elephant sitting on your lap? I give you this effery with the world 0.7 C above the 1979 to 2000 baseline. I love these baselines. Just pick a baseline, any baseline. I've only seen this a couple of times, and every time it's been a precursor for really bad news for someone. Which is, basically what's going on in the Arctic with the non-existent jet stream, just in the polar, where the air is supposed to be cold, the polar cap, the air has been blasted into smithereens all over the place. So this is why the cold can be attributed to global warming or climate change or whatever. This is why. For the people that don't understand science, the people that usually can see things very clearly, who don't want to see things clearly, when it comes to this is called the science. But don't pay any attention if you don't want to. Just Stop Oil protesters have glued themselves to the pavement outside of Buckingham Palace. Jesus. Please, can British cops do what the French did? Rip their hands off the pavement and cart them off. All right. We'll move on. I think what he means is that because of the weather, the situation where it's extreme heat anomaly in the Arctic and Greenland, and there's weather whiplash. Well, this is kind of what it looks like. The weather whiplash. Meaning somebody will get hit by something crazy soon enough. Heat doesn't seem to want to leave Western USA and Canada. Temperatures are still typical of summer for the Sacramento Valley to British Columbia yesterday. 100 Fahrenheit at Reading. That is it's pretty wild. 100 degrees in October. Not saying it's never happened before, but it's still pretty anomalous. In Oregon, up to 94 Fahrenheit. Record for the latest 87 Fahrenheit at Portland, 89 Fahrenheit at Hillsboro. That's in Oregon. Another summer week is ahead. And look at this cold mass over the eastern part of the U.S. That's exactly what climate change looks like. Extreme heat bumping up against extreme cold, and then all kinds of weirdness in between. Nord Stream leaks. Let's look at this article for a moment. The Nord Stream leaks, a catastrophe for climate goals. Well, yeah. I mean, the headline pretty much says it all. Explosions on September 25th at the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines in the Baltic Sea. I mean, pretty much war and blowing stuff up is bad for climate goals. I'm going to venture. Explosions at the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines in the Baltic Sea off the Swedish and Danish coast could create a climate catastrophe that is just beginning to be realized. Although it offers rare opportunities to measure the exact impact of methane emissions on the environment. Already dubbed the worst methane leak ever, the 3 explosions, which created 3 holes in the 2 systems, which each consist of 2 pipes, have released about 300,000 tons of methane, causing a 700-meter wide pool of bubbling water in the Baltic Sea. The explosions, which the Ukrainian government immediately blamed on Russia, while the German government suggested sabotage, have created large releases of methane, a scientific name for natural gas. The leak will make it more difficult for Europe and indeed the world to meet climate goals, although the exact effects of the released gas on the environment are just being realized. The Nord Stream methane leaks have the potential to cause chaos for efforts to reduce methane emissions over the next 2 decades and could increase the already high danger of failing to meet net zero by 2050. The explosions took place at a depth of 80 to 90 meters just outside Danish and Swedish territorial waters. This means that sophisticated and advanced underwater technology, or even a submarine, would have been required. While Germany and the EU pointed the finger at Russia, the Kremlin denied any responsibility, pointing to explicit threats by U.S. President Joe Biden and others ahead of the war in the U.S. that would shut down the Nord Stream 2. It's good to take those explicit threats, as evidence for context of maybe who did this. Anyways, I think we know that this is an issue. Sorry, nobody's seeing this. I think we know this is an issue for the climate. But again, war and blowing stuff up bad for the climate. In general, if you want to accelerate the damage that we're doing to the planet, have a war. Everything will just we'll just knock it on out that much faster, right? From Peter Dines, the Mississippi River is competing with the Rhine for more climate-induced disturbance. Another supply chain crisis. This is from CNN. Another supply chain crisis. Barge traffic halted on Mississippi River by the lowest water levels in a decade. We've been covering this almost daily now for the last week. The lowest water levels in the Mississippi River in a decade, caused by a severe drought, have closed the vital channel to barge traffic at a crucial time of the year for the transport of crops from the nation's heartland. The American Army Corps of Engineers has been dredging portions of the river for the past week in an attempt to deepen channels and get barge traffic moving again. But the closures have caused a massive tie-up in the nation's already struggling supply chains. The low water has been responsible for 8 barges running aground during the last week, according to the report from the U.S. Coast Guard. Oh, and one cruise ship having to turn around, I guess, or get stuck somewhere. As of Friday, the Coast Guard reports that there are 144 vessels and 2,253 barges queued up and waiting just to get through 2 stretches of the river where traffic has been halted, one near Memphis, the other just north of Vicksburg, Mississippi. While the Coast Guard statement said it hopes to resume traffic again as soon as late Friday, it couldn't say for certain when that would happen. Wow. Even when the barges start moving again, they'll be forced to carry as much as 20% less cargo than normal in order to not ride too deep in the water. And rather than a single vessel moving between 30 to 40 barges at one time, as they normally do, they've been forced to move no more than 25 barges on each trip due to the more narrow channels. All right, that is, it's one more stumbling block for the U.S. supply chains that are still struggling to recover from the disruptions since the start of the pandemic 2.5 years ago. West Coast ports, where most of the nation's imports arrive by container ship, are still congested too. And while a freight railroad strike was narrowly averted last month, even the freight railroads themselves admit they are providing substandard levels of service as they struggle with their own labor shortages. In Germany, river levels fell on the Rhine River in August, limiting barge traffic there, including coal shipments needed to supply power plants. The U.S. drought is getting worse. There are few signs of relief for the low water levels on the Mississippi. Another dry week across much of the central and southern U.S. has led to intensifying drought conditions across much of the Great Plains, Mississippi Valley, and the Midwest, according to the latest update from the U.S. Drought Monitor. There's a very dry pattern during the last month, and it has led to significant degradation in crops and river levels, the summary noted. Up to 57% of Arkansas is experiencing severe drought, the highest in 5 years. 3 months ago, it was less than 1% to the north. The amount of Missouri judged to be in a severe drought condition has doubled each of the past 2 weeks and is now up to 30% of the state of Missouri is in drought condition. Well, that's not good. For those of you watching, I'm sorry I keep showing you what I'm reading like after I'm reading it. I apologize. Try to stop doing that. There's in Europe. Well, the drought has not finished with Europe. This is from Peter Carter. Peter Carter. Western Europe prolonged severe drought. This is from October 8th, 2022. Western Europe prolonged severe drought. Root zone soil mixture moisture vegetation health index. European climate drought emergency inaction is insane. So this is what it's looking like. Soil moisture deficit. Vegetation health index. So they're still experiencing drought conditions in Europe. In South Africa, still experiencing some heat. Not as severe as it was yesterday. It looks like there's a cold front that has moved down into Africa. But in southern Africa, still hot, still very, very hot. Brutal heat in southern Africa yesterday. 46C at Moti in Eswatini, former Swaziland, the highest ever recorded in the country in October. In South Africa, 43.7C at Komati-Dry. Komati-Dry. I don't know how to pronounce that. Super hot there in the southern tip of Africa. All right. At this time, I'm going to take a look at the coffees. All right. Got a coffee from Osama. Ukrainians are posing with a giant postage stamp depicting the blown up bridge linking Russia and Crimea. Thanks, man. Thanks for the coffee and thanks for the link. I saw that actually. And didn't they put that stamp out the very day? The very day that it happened? That's interesting. Like how well, they're posing with a giant postage stamp, but there is an actual, they actually did release a stamp. This is what I heard. You got to kind of ask the question, how does that happen? The same day. I mean, or is there foreknowledge involved? I don't know. Ukrainians are celebrating the bridge explosion that collapsed a key link between Russia and Crimea. Ukrainians are celebrating and posing next to a giant postage stamp depicting the Crimea bridge explosion on Saturday that severely damaged the sole road route from Russia to Crimea. In Kiev, Ukrainians celebrated by posing with an oversized postage stamp depicting the bridge explosion. Anyways, I think most people know what is going on there, right? Or what went on there. It does seem very suspicious, doesn't it, Judy? All right, I'm going to check Rockfin for some tips. No tips on Rockfin. Oops. Anyways, thanks for the tip, Osama. All right, now's a good time to call in for the next 4 or 5 minutes or so. I think I'm going to jump off of YouTube though and cover some other news. Although, well, we'll talk about this for a moment. All right, we do have a call from Jenny. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
So sobering what we're going through right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, no doubt.
When I was a young mom, I had a nervous breakdown after the birth of my first baby. And this was right at the tail end of the Cold War. Reagan had already given his tear down this wall speech, but it was before the wall came down.
Okay.
And in an altered state, I was full blown postpartum
Yeah.
psychosis, they call it.
Yeah.
I lived through a nuclear war. I saw the bombs going off. I hallucinated the mushroom clouds.
Wow.
And in my mind, that was the worst thing, that could possibly happen. And if you remember, when Reagan gave that speech, it was not well received in America. There were a lot of people part of the State Department who were angry at him.
Sure.
And there was a lot in the media just really ripping him for his stance. And so it was during that time, that kind of 2-year spread between the speech and when the wall came down, that I had this experience. And ever since then, what I've done is I've educated myself about the realities of living through a nuclear holocaust. And what I've learned is we're not all going to die. Once you get the facts, you really can start to thoughtfully prepare and just kind of reason your way through it. And as I did that, I realized that it was kind of a prophylactic against me being terrorized by the reality of this thing. And so just having a few supplies on hand, and I read a book called Nuclear War Survival Skills, it really helped me get to a place where I was no longer.
Yeah. I think that is an accurate word for what people are not excited about the possibility of a nuclear war, right? Or the escalation. There is an escalation happening for sure, right? And so, um, okay. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh, oh, yeah. Well, I just tried to hold on one second, Jenny. Sorry. You were saying some very good things, but I'm trying to see if you're. A lot of people said they lost your sound. I was trying to fix the sound, and I want to see if I can get if someone can tell me in the chats if they can hear Jenny again. Everybody was saying everybody was saying they couldn't hear you anymore. So can you all hear Jenny again? Yeah, I'm sorry. I think they heard the first part of the conversation, but then they said that you had dropped out. Can you all hear Jenny again? Limited. No caller? Still? You still can't hear her? That's so weird. That is so bizarre. Um, hmm. Oh, you know what happened? I know what happened. Sorry, guys. You know what? And sorry, Jenny. So I tried to fix the sound, but it darn it. Okay, now you should be back on Jenny. Okay. Okay, you guys should be able to hear her. It really sucks because it flips the sound back out to my computer sound. Anyways, my fault. It was my fault, Jenny, but I didn't. Now you should be back on.
Should I tell my little story
You
again,
can
or
go
should
back
I
through the
just let it
story. You
go?
can go back through the story of go from
My sister?
downwinders. You guys can hear Jenny again. Let me know. Hold
Yeah.
on. I'm hold on. They can't hear you on Rockfin. Hold on. Sorry. Guys. So this is so weird. They should be able to hear you loud and clear. Okay. All right. So you're okay on YouTube. Can you all hear her on Rockfin?
I'm still here.
Can you hear Jenny on Rockfin? She just said something. Rockfinners, please let me know if you can hear her. Okay. All right.
Can you hear
Okay.
me?
You're back. You're back.
Okay.
You're back. Sorry, my bad.
So I was just sharing the story of my sister-in-law who grew up in southern Utah. And during the time when she was a child, the government was testing nukes in the desert of Nevada. And what they would do is they would set them off whenever the wind was blowing east towards Utah. They wouldn't set them off if it was blowing towards California because it was an urban center. So my sister-in-law was one of these kids who've been diagnosed as a downwinder. These are people who develop cancer from these childhood exposures. And so she was given the gift of some money from the government to help with her medical bills. And there were some children who died back then of fast-acting cancers. So it was definitely a thing acknowledged by the government. My message in sharing the story of my sister, though, is that she went on to have 4 beautiful children. 2 of her boys are doctors. They're really smart, good kids. Everybody's married. Most of them are married and have children of their own. So there was no long-term effects on her fertility or her kids' fertility. And my point is that even if you get exposed to some fallout, you can still have a happy life. You can still be relatively healthy. And so I'm trying to help diffuse because the trope is, oh, if we have a nuke go off in America, why would we want to live? Why should we prepare? None of us are going to live anywhere. If we do live, it'll just be a hellscape. And my contention is, no, it won't. You know, maybe in the blast area, there'll be some chaos and people will die. And downwind of where it goes off, there will probably be clusters of cancers down the road. But there's so much you can do to mitigate that terror just by doing a little bit of prep. And so I read a book called Nuclear War Survival Skills that if you'll Google that, there's an online version of it available for free. And
Okay.
reading that book just really helped diffuse my own terror around this issue. And as I said in the beginning, I don't know if everybody could hear this, but I did have a nervous breakdown. And while I was in a hallucinatory state, I saw bombs going off, mushroom clouds. And I really believed that we were having a nuclear war during my psychosis. And so to help myself heal from that, I've educated myself with these materials and then just made some prudent preparations so that if something happens, I know what to do. I don't need to be paralyzed. So that's my message
Well,
today. I
thanks
shared
for
the same message on.
yeah. Thanks for the words of wisdom. I think also it has to do with the severity of surviving one nuclear blast or one nuclear meltdown maybe at a plant. I think I mean maybe it's not the end if one goes off, but I think what everybody's really frightened about is is a nuclear exchange, right? Or if you have several bombs going off, then it starts, not only is it that you get the fallout and all that, but you also get the thing called nuclear winter where
Right.
the
I
ecosystem is
don't
altered.
want to be in denial of how bad that would be. And President Biden's out there talking about Armageddon, and who knows what he means when he says that word.
Yeah.
But I just feel like a little bit of preparation is a great place to put your energies and your thinking rather than just assuming you're going to be a victim.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, kind of coincides with what I was saying about prepping the other day, which is, a lot of people are like F prepping or why would you prep or it doesn't matter. But, I was using the example of the COVID lockdowns as a reason to prep, right? Because you had a situation where there was a run on things for a couple of weeks, but everything came back, online in a month or two, right? Things kind of evened out, right? But there was this moment where everybody was running to the store and buying everything up, so a lot of things were in short supply, and that would be a moment. Right, that was a moment where it would have been really good to have prepped, right? So, and I guess the same thing with
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
right. And so,
If
depending on the
you
severity of what, or maybe
if
we
you
have.
are in a place,
I was just going to say one more thing. If you have a nuclear blast somewhere, it can take out the grid, right? The infrastructure, right? So you would have there's always been talk about a nuclear blast being used as an EMP,
right?
or to knock out everybody's the electrical grid, and that also is something that could happen. So let's say it's not even a nuclear blast. Maybe it's something else that takes out the grid, but the grid is down and it'll be down for a while, but eventually it comes back online in a month or two. But that month or two is going to be pure hell for people who don't have anything. So if you had something on hand.
That's really my point.
Yeah.
Once you learn the facts about what happens with fallout, if you can just be prepared to be in your home for 3 days without having to go anywhere, that's the majority of the problem is right away. And then for 2 weeks, if you can just stay in your home, keep the doors and windows shut, that right there will protect you from like most of the danger from downwind cancers. And then just having basic food, water, if you have children, some supplies to feed them, so you don't have to go outside. That to me is the place to put your energy today. Get some water, get a little bit of food. Why not?
Sure. I actually I totally agree with you on that. There's also another thing that people are talking about, but maybe I need to jump off YouTube before we get there. But well, I think I'll hold that thought for a later comment. But thank you for the call, Jenny. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It was good, solid advice. All right.
See you on the other side of whatever, right?
Yeah, see you on the other side of whatever. Exactly. All right. At this point in time, I'm going to, before we jump off YouTube, we'll quickly acknowledge that Russia did a bunch of strikes on Ukraine in retaliation for what they think was a intentional strike on the bridge, right? We talked about the bridge yesterday. Russia rained cruise missiles on busy Ukrainian cities on Monday in what the United States called horrific strikes, killing civilians. And this has a lot of people nervous because this is definitely an escalation. And who knows what will happen from here. I don't know. Missiles tore into intersections, parks, and tourist sites in the capital, Kiev. And explosions were reported in Lviv, Ternopil, Zhytomyr, Western Ukraine, Dnipro, and Kremenchuk in the center, Zaporizhia in the south, and Kharkiv in the east. So there were a lot of strikes, missile strikes from Russia on Ukraine today, and that has a lot of people nervous. And I guess we'll look at before we jump off of YouTube. We'll finish the show on Rockfin, but here's a graphic from Slow News Day. Posted this map of confirmed Russian artillery strikes in Ukraine over the last several hours. Reports of loss of power throughout the country. There you go. We were just talking about the lack of power, loss of power. Reports of loss of power throughout the country. SBU headquarters among the buildings targeted in Kiev. Infrastructure targets struck as well. That's a lot of blasts there. That's That's like pretty much all of Ukraine. So they just hit Ukraine. They lit Ukraine up pretty much. And we have blasts in literally every part of the country except for this little region here, and maybe down here. So yeah, it's a big, it's a pretty big strike today. And a lot of people are talking about it. We'll talk more about it on Rockfin. YouTubers, I'm gonna check out for the day on YouTube. You can follow the rest of the show on Rockfin. We got about 15, 17 minutes left of the show, give or take. We're also on Callin, of course. So peace out, guys.